Over the past year, AI has hit the mainstream, enhancing productivity, creativity, and so much more. The tools have never been easier to acquire and use, so clearly it's here to stay. So today I wanted to take a look at ChatGPT and some applications for music and musicians. This certainly isn't a comprehensive list of possible uses. These are just some ways I've found it useful, but it'll soon be apparent the ways you can use it are infinite. Before diving into the information, I do want to preface with a few things. Firstly, going into this video, a basic understanding of ChatGPT is necessary because I'm not going to be diving into the basics. I won't be diving into making an account or the basics of prompts, but as you'll soon see, you might not even need to know anything about prompts or any of the basics really. It's very easy to use and very intuitive. Secondly, ChatGPT is not perfect. There are a lot of factors that could result in responses that are less than perfect or less than accurate for what you're looking for. ChatGPT is trained on a limited amount of training data, some of which can be biased or inaccurate. ChatGPT is not a musician capable of experiencing emotions or music, so it might not understand the nuance of what you're looking for. And finally, the responses you get will depend heavily on what you input, how you write it, the context, and how it interprets it. So although it's an incredibly powerful tool, go into its use knowing some of the information may be false or inaccurate. With all that said, let's talk about ChatGPT for musicians. The first way we can integrate ChatGPT into our music is talking about theory and composition. I'm writing a track in C minor. What are all the 3 and 4 part chords I can use? In the key of C minor, there are several 3 and 4 part chords you can use to create your track. Here are some commonly used chords in C minor. Let's turn this into a chord progression now. Can you create an 8-part chord progression with any of those chords? I'm looking for something uplifting. Certainly. Here's an example of an uplifting 8-part chord progression using some of the chords mentioned earlier in the key of C minor. Okay, let's make this a little bit more interesting. Can you rewrite the chords but modulate modes? Look at that. Simple. So I could transfer that into my DAW, but now let's get it to write a melody over top. Can you write a melody over top? Notice how it also displays it differently. In this case, it's a lot easier to visualize, which would make this a lot easier to transfer into MIDI or play on an instrument. That being said, I want to modify it and make it more interesting. So, can you make it more complex? There we go. This melody incorporates additional melodic embellishments such as passing tones, neighboring tones, and repeated motifs. This can be an excellent tool for developing theory and even developing knowledge. You can learn certain tips and tricks or ideas while you use ChatGPT to come up with music theory for you. Again, though, I do want to know, be wary. It does stand a chance of being inaccurate or not even sounding very good. Nevertheless, from my experience, you can easily achieve cool results quickly and just start generating ideas that way. Next, I want to talk about song lyrics and songwriting. For both seasoned songwriters and the lyrically challenged, such as myself, ChatGPT can be a really useful tool for coming up with lyrics and song ideas. It can take a bit of experimentation to make it sound human and not tacky, but with the right inputs in terms of style, lyrical content, you'll soon see that we can achieve useful results, even if it's just coming up with a line or two. Write some dark and dreary lyrics about the struggles of life. You can be quite experimental with your words. So almost instantly, you can see it came up with verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, outro, an entire song. I'm not going to subject you to me reading this out, but you can see there are some nice lines in there. But let's say it didn't really fit the style we wanted. Maybe we're going for more of a rap song or something like that. So let's ask it to rewrite it. Now can you turn it into a sad rap song? So it took the same idea, but it changed it up, referenced the fact that it is a sad rap song. Again, maybe this will be tacky sounding to you, but maybe there's even a line you could take, or it'll just trigger a lyric or something. Now this can have mixed results, but you can even ask it to write lyrics in the style of a specific artist. So for example, can we rewrite this in the style of Kendrick Lamar, and can you add in lyrics about order and chaos? Random, but let's try it out. So you might get the occasional dumb line like, this is a Kendrick style rap. Obviously that's not good, but there might be things in here that could be considered useful and in his style. Again, it'll be mixed results. It's worth experimenting, but sometimes you actually get things that do sound like it was written by a certain artist, and it can just have their flavor and cadence. So the ways you can manipulate the lyrics and come up with the results are pretty much endless. It's just a matter of experimenting, playing around, seeing what you can get. Sometimes it'll be exactly what you want. Sometimes it'll just be a starting point. Sometimes it'll be laughable, but again, this is why it's just a tool. Expanding on the previous two ideas, the next way you can use ChatGPT in your music production is almost like a collaborator in the studio. Not quite in terms of music theory or songwriting, but almost like an idea generator. Imagine someone in the studio that you can bounce ideas off of, come up with themes or come up with ideas. That's the next way I want to look at this. So let's imagine we already did the theory portion and we had it come up with some chords. So can you write me a chord progression with dense chords, make it dark? Actually, those chords weren't dense enough for me, so can you make those chords thicker? Perfect. Let's say that's our starting point. So now, can you orchestrate the chords, spreading them out over multiple instruments? Check this out. So now it's taken the chord progression, it's actually applied different instruments to the chord, which may not be as useful, but then it's broken up how each chord is played. So for example, the root A is played by a specific instrument, the E by a different instrument. This is an example of where it might not be useful, where each chord was applied to a different instrument. Maybe that's not necessarily what I wanted. But what I could do is, can you assign instruments to each note of the chord, keep it strings? There we go. Each note of each chord, it actually picked an instrument, be it cellos for the root, violins, violas, violins again, double bass. Now this is an example where maybe it wasn't very good. For example, why would the double bass be all the way up in the 11th? So maybe you would have to play that down at the bottom, but it could still generate ideas for you in that sense. Now I've got my collaborator in the room. I want to step outside of string instruments that I'm familiar with. So what's a non-Western instrument I could use to add a mysterious, dark quality to the track? Cool. So here's a bunch of instruments that I could try orchestrating with instead of strings to have it just feel a little different and not something that my ear is as traditionally used to hearing. Now let's just try another example. I've still got my collaborator with me. So I want to write a dubstep track and I want it to sound like it's from a retro video game. What should I do? Creating a dubstep track with a retro video game vibe can be a fun and creative project. Here are some steps you can follow to achieve that sound. Research, chiptune melodies, wobble bass, drum patterns, sound effects, and it describes them. Retro video games often use distinct sound effects that can add charm to the track. Utilize 8-bit or 16-bit sound effects, coin pickups, power-ups, laser shots. Now let's say that's a bit too basic for me, but I want to figure out, what retro synths could I use? What synths could give it that chiptune retro aesthetic? We could get a Game Boy emulator, Commodore 64, massive retro log. We can just ask for more if you want more ideas, if that's not enough. See, now we're getting into some things I'm not familiar with. Cool. So let's say I wanted to dive deeper with this. That leads me into my next point, which is research and education. ChatGPT can be really nice for researching topics you don't understand or getting more information, which with music and music production is a constant hill that needs to be climbed. So let's say, for example, I wanted to get one of these synths. Let's research, how could I acquire one of them? So it suggests VSTs and plugins, talks to me about DAWs, starts going into hardware synths, sample packs, sound libraries, secondhand market. Or we could ask it another question. Are there artists that combine video game sounds with dubstep? Here's some notable examples. Virtual Riot, absolutely. Game Chops, I actually don't know Game Chops. Oh, it's a record label. Cool. There we go. Now I have some more music for my sets. I can check out this label. So let's say I'm familiar with these artists, but I just want to listen to more chiptune style music. Well, what are some musicians I could listen to explore chiptune music? Gives me another list. So it can be really cool for even developing sets, finding artists in a specific style that you're not familiar with. Now let's say I acquired a synthesizer, I've referenced the artists, but I don't actually know how to make the sounds. Well, what type of synthesis could I use to make video game sounds? Can you teach me about it? Pulse width modulation, frequency modulation, subtractive synthesis, LFOs, maybe that's not the best answer. So far that's kind of a random, not so much of an answer. And sample playback, so sampling. This is one area where I suggest being on high alert for misinformation. You can see above there were already some things that may not have been perfect, like LFOs being a type of synthesis. It's not. And I'm sure digging into specific information about plugins might not be very accurate. So keep your guard up, but also don't discount it or discredit it. It can still be an incredible tool. Lastly, stepping outside of the music creation process, ChatGPT can be used in our music careers to speed up or come up with ideas regarding marketing, copy for posts and email, and so much more. For example, I have a new song coming out. Let's see if this can help me come up with a release. So I have a glitchy, abstract, future-based song coming out soon. Can you give me 20 ideas on how I could promote it? Music video, teasing snippets, collaborating with influencers and YouTubers, behind the scenes video, submitting to blogs, virtual listening party, playlist submissions, visual artist collaboration. It goes on. Live Q&A, remixes, remix contest, all pretty standard stuff. But if you're new to this, or if you want to expand on it further, I'm sure you could get some unique ideas. For example, how could I turn this into a 2-week release plan? Perfect. So it broke it up, it even told me what to do after the release and put it into a nice release schedule for me so I didn't have to come up with that. Now let's say I suck at writing and I want it to come up with the posts for me for that plan. Can you write me an announcement post, include the following points? It releases May 14th. It's a glitchy future-based tune. I wrote it while staying in Australia. Mark your calendars for the 14th. I'm thrilled to unveil my latest musical creation, a mind-bending, glitchy future-based tune that will take you on a sonic journey like no other. Let's say I find that a little tacky. I don't like the emojis. It's a bit too long for me. Can you shorten it, remove all the emojis, and make it a bit more eloquent? I'm thrilled to unveil my latest musical creation, a mesmerizing, glitchy future-based tune. This sonic masterpiece was conceived during my stay in the enchanting landscapes of Australia. So let's say I'm happy with that, but now I need it to write me up something to send to all the blogs and playlists. So can you turn this into an email to send to blogs? Adds the subject and writes me an email. Again, if it's too long-winded, you can ask it to shorten it. If it sounds like AI, you can ask it to sound more human or more casual. Can you shorten it and make it more human sounding? Didn't really shorten it, so can you make it only 200 words? I'm not going to count it. I'll take its word for it. Might be more, but you can see that saved me a tremendous amount of time. It's hard to believe this is just the beginning of these tools being used by the masses. It's certainly exciting, terrifying, raises a lot of ethical questions, but that's a topic for another time. I hope that brief look at using ChatGPT in your music is getting some ideas stirring in your mind. And if not, I'm sure you could ask ChatGPT to come up with some ideas for you. Wishing you well on your journey and enjoy the rest of the day.